What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning into this video. I thought it'd be kind of interesting for you guys to find out what it was like on a show day for Elvis in the later 70s. This is what Dr. Nick said Elvis's day was like, because he'd be there, he'd be his, doctor, and he'd be giving him, whatever he needed and helping him there, because by that time, Elvis had Dr. Nick full time. So let me tell you what it was like from this book. It's called The King and Dr. Nick. So get him up about, or not him personally, but whoever would be doing it, would get him up about 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon. And Elvis would start with black coffee. And I didn't know he liked black coffee. Like, I don't like it. I think it's kind of gross. But Elvis I guess he liked black coffee. So Elvis would have some black coffee, 3-4 in the afternoon. Then he'd have an appetite suppressant. And Dr. Nick says that maybe sometimes it was something innocuous or something like maybe an amphetamine substance, I guess if he wanted a little extra kick, because appetite suppressants really are just like caffeine or speed. Then he would give him a decongestant and his blood pressure medicine. And so I guess, Elvis did have some issues with blood pressure, so he would do that. Then he said he would relax for a few hours as he was getting ready for the show. Dr. Nick says after Elvis was suited up, he would give him a B12 shot. And Dr. Nick says B12 shots were popular in the 70s. And Elvis felt that really helped him and gave him a kick. And depending on what location Elvis was in the United States, he would give him something for a decongestant, like an antihistamine, because Elvis, I guess, had a phobia of getting what he said all clogged up, before a show and not being able to hit his notes because, they weren't coming out right because of his congestion. Also, Dr. Nick says that Elvis had a problem quite often with his eyes, and that since Elvis actually dyed his eyelashes black as well, and Elvis always dyed his hair black. Some people, like this girl I was talking to the other day, she did not know that Elvis dyed his hair black, and that it was actually, he was like light brown. So that's still funny to me how some people don't know that, but I guess if you're not really a hardcore Elvis fan, you wouldn't. But I guess Dr. Nick says Elvis got conjunctivitis a lot because he would dye his eyelashes and he was having problems with his eyes. He says that it would irritate his eyes when he would sweat. So he said that actually the reason for Elvis using the scarves was to keep the sweat out of his eyes, which I didn't know about. Dr. Nick says he would actually also give Elvis a voice shot. He said that he got into that because in Vegas it was really dry, and he didn't want his throat to be extra dry and he couldn't hit his notes and sing well. So he says that it was developed by Dr. Sidney Boyers, a throat specialist, developed a secret concoction, a combination of 3 or 4 different herbs. Some say it was snake oil or a steroid, but Elvis would take this shot and he believed in it. And sometimes Elvis would say that, depending on the severity of his throat, he would actually take the concoction in vials and swallow it so it would get right on his vocal cords right then. And it wouldn't matter how his voice felt before the show. He thought that if he got this, he wouldn't have any problems with his voice, because Elvis didn't want to have any problems projecting his voice or having his voice cracking. Dr. Nick said Elvis had a lot of phobias about that, and I guess you can imagine being in front of all those people. So Dr. Nick also says that he would give Elvis these type of shots before and after his concerts. And the people around him thought, oh, he's getting like amphetamines, uppers, downers, whatever. But a lot of times it was like for his throat, because Elvis felt like if he got it administered to him in a shot, it was just more effective. So that was just Elvis's thing. So it wasn't always something devilish, It was, out of necessity.
And I love you so. I need all the help I can get.
So, how was the sound in it? building.
Very good, very good.
Very good.
Sound like it was good.
It really did.
And then so that was the pre-show. Now after show would be different. So Dr. Nick would be watching Elvis throughout the show to see, like, judging on Elvis's movements, how he felt and how he would have to administer medication to Elvis after he got off stage. So for instance, like, he would be watching Elvis during, say, Polk Salad Annie to, you know, see, you know, judging by his movements, like, oh, it looks like because he didn't want Elvis to pull a muscle, because a lot of times Elvis would have to do a show a few hours later. So he would check, and he said that he could usually tell whether Elvis, you know, hurt himself or something. I'm thinking, like, come on. You know, yeah, Elvis did exert himself a lot for Polk Salad Annie, and other things, but they're, you know, regular movements. Like, you're watching him closely to see how often or if he's going to pull a muscle. Like, is it really going to happen that regularly? But, you know, he did. And so when Elvis got off stage, he would, I guess, Dr. Nick says Elvis would try to kind of trick him into Dr. Nick giving him some pain meds when he didn't really need them. So he had to check for himself, you know, really what type of pain Elvis was in. You know, he said depending on the severity of the pain and how long it would be for his next show, like a lot of times, like I said, he'd have a show a few hours later. So he said that he would give him a low dose of Dilaudid mixed with some saline or B12. So because he needed something fast acting, because Elvis might have to be on the stage again in a few more hours, so he needed it to work fast. So this was like pretty much the protocol that Dr. Nick started to have with Elvis, and this was like in the mid 70s at this point. And these plans were sort of scrapped because Dr. Nick started to realize that Elvis was getting things from other physicians as well. So it really wouldn't work too well from Dr. Nick's perspective. That's what he said. So I hope you've enjoyed this little bit of insight into the Elvis world. I found it pretty interesting, and I'll continue to share some interesting stories here and there with you guys on the books that I read.